Hi everyone, thank you for watching. Today it's gonna be a video that you have requested for. A lot of you wanted to know what are my meals like on a higher protein ratio. So if you like to see what I do for my first meal, what I do for my second meal, and how I kind of plan it according to my lifestyle and my workout, please continue watching. Maybe before I share with you my meals, perhaps it's good that I share with you why I'm actually on a higher protein. I do get this question a lot. So to give you a background, I did started out carnivore on a higher fat, but it wasn't a consistent thing. I was always trying to find which ratio was suitable for me. So it's been 2.5 years. So earlier this year, actually came across a lot of YouTube videos and podcasts, especially by Dr. Ted Naiman, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, even Ketogenic Girl. She is always a advocate for higher protein. They spoke about body recomposition and about the importance of muscles. And that's when it really intrigued me to find out more about how would this be my next experiment. Came across a interview by Ketogenic Girl where she did it with Ella Bruce. Ella Bruce is not someone that it's popular in the community, but she did higher protein carnivore diet, and I think it was purely for body recomposition purpose, and she did get some amazing results from it. And then when she started talking about how higher protein fuels her kind of workout better, I think that really resonated with me because as you guys follow along my journey, you know that I am a fan of very high intensity workouts. Whether it's HIIT training, sprint intervals, or really just strength training of heavier lifting, like deadlift is really one of my favorite routine. That you would need a certain kind of ratio that will support it. So I started going deep into this topic by researching more, listening to a lot of podcasts, and then I learned a lot more about protein than I ever did before. So I think that's why they call it the black sheep of the macronutrient, where it's not really talked about. It's always about the carbs, it's always about the fats, but nobody really spoke about protein. And I'm so glad that I found all these studies and knowledge. So let's cut to the chase. Why am I on a higher protein ratio on a carnivore diet? It's because I want to promote lean mass. I want to have a higher lean mass. It's been 2.5 years. Even from keto, body recomposition or maintaining my shape has always been important to me. But of course, if you watch my previous video about my body recomposition journey, you know that I went a bit extreme when I was in keto. So I'm at a phase where I'm trying to maintain, all the muscles that I've worked hard for, but in a very sustainable manner, and that is also healthy. So I was always trying to find what is that method. And I'm so glad that I came upon this prioritizing protein and the use of muscle. It's really more than just aesthetics. The second reason why I'm on a higher protein is because in terms of digestion, don't get me wrong, carnivore has healed many of my issues, especially digestive issues from keto, because giant bowl of salads, right? But when I do higher fat, I realize that if I'm not especially careful about the rendered fats, or in today's time, we don't really have the luxury to wait out, to really properly plan things. So when it comes to meals, sometimes when I'm on the go and I just need to throw in a piece of steak in the air fryer and eat it instantly after that so I can get back to work, I noticed that if I do that with a fatty cut of meat when there is a lot of marbling, the fats will get rendered, and it's going to be hot. The the fattier parts, I would eat it because obviously I only have that short amount of time to have my meal. Um, and all of you carnivores, I'm sure most of you would know this. If you attempt to eat like rendered fat that is immediately cooked, from the air fryer of the stove, you know that it's going to send you to the washroom like straight away most of the time. So I think for me, it wasn't the ideal situation. I wouldn't say that it happens very commonly, but if I'm not especially careful, some of the fats will actually cause me to have a bit of digestive issues. Not a massive one, which I had before in keto, but there are those days that I just want to ingest something, it gets digested, and then I can move along my day. And I found that to be of higher protein. So I realized, because I have experimented both ends, higher fat, higher protein, even 1-to-1 ratio. I would say my sweet spot is 1-to-1 ratio, but sometimes, you get inspired, like, oh, you know what, I wanna show more muscles, I'm going to go higher protein, or I'm craving more fat, so tweak towards that extreme. Normally 1-to-1 ratio works very well for most people, at least the ones that I speak to. But I realized that if I do higher protein, I feel satiated longer throughout the day. Sometimes it could be my cycle. Sometimes even when I'm eating higher fat, 70%, which is the recommended ratio, right? And because my protein couldn't be that high either, because you're trying to balance it out when you're doing higher fat, I noticed that I don't feel so satiated, and it's like you feel like you didn't eat enough even when it's on higher fat. So that's for me, and I realized that when I have more protein, I feel more satiated. From Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's sharing, I will link it down somewhere below, is that for every 100 grams of dietary protein that your body ingests, it will be converted into 60 grams of carbohydrate or glucose, which, I think this whole idea to me when I first heard about it was a little bit crazy. I'm like, oh, so this gluconeogenesis is real, right? If you eat too much protein, it's going to turn into cake. I mean, that's how they painted it to be. Not be very accurate, but this is what I've gotten from the studies that she's done. So if you ingest that 100 grams of protein and it's going to be converted into glucose, then I guess it kind of makes sense for people like me, or if you are in a similar workout routine as me where you enjoy high intensity, really heavy load kind of workout. I think going to gluconeogenesis is a very expensive process because your body needs to convert it before it can access the energy. I think it kind of makes sense because when you're doing explosive glycolytic workouts, right, your body would want to access its energy quickly, and that would be the glucose that is converted from the higher protein. So for me, I definitely eat more than 100 grams of protein every day. Surprisingly, sometimes it's not something that I do very often. I'm very cautious now about going to extreme because I know my personality. So there are days that I will go up to 200 grams of protein, which is pretty high for my short height. But I guess I could pull it off. Still not sure, still experimenting, keep you posted. It's because of the intensity and the duration of my workouts. So to summarize, if you have a similar workout routine where it's more glycolytic, it's more intense, it's explosive, higher protein may be beneficial for you. Another very cool learning that I got was that this whole idea about prioritizing protein. So naturally, if you are interested in higher protein, you would then naturally in every meal, or especially your first meal, you will try to make sure that you have not just higher protein. Your higher protein will automatically means that you will meet a minimum required amount of protein to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So what this means is that when you, this is according to Dr. Gabriel Lyon, right? Your first meal, if you have minimum of 30 grams of protein, that would look like 100 grams, no, actually more than that. That would look like 150 or 200 grams of steak. I think if it's 200 grams of steak, you would have 50, because 100 grams of steak will give you 25 grams of protein. If you were to have 200 grams of steak, I'm really amazed at my maths here without the calculator. Okay, so if you have 200 grams of steak, because it's 25 for 100 grams, right? So you will have around 50 grams of protein. Obviously it's going to be enough to stimulate that muscle protein synthesis. So what are the benefits to this muscle protein synthesis is that it's going to promote satiety. I guess that's why I feel more satiated when I have enough or higher protein. It's responsible for thermogenesis, so you know how your body uses energy, your thyroid hormone. Some of your carnivores out there, you would know when you eat higher protein, sometimes you will feel that sweat, you know, that very warm effect. I guess it's from the thermogenic effect. So it tends to promote or boost metabolism, so you burn more calories. When there's muscle protein synthesis that is sparked from that 30 grams of protein in your first meal, is going to help to regulate your blood sugar better throughout the rest of the day. That's something that I can't really speak for it because I don't really test my blood glucose anymore. But some people that I work with, if they don't eat enough protein in their first meal, I see that it's very often that they would have cravings and they don't just feel satisfied. Then they end up eating more in the second meal or through the later part of the day, which is not very ideal. Okay, so let's get down to the main part of the video, which you want to know my higher protein ratio meals, right? So I'm going to begin with my first meal. I don't call it breakfast or lunch because it depends on my day. It could be breakfast. Sometimes I would fast naturally and it will end up being a lunch. So typically my higher protein days, okay, to not confuse you, I will always, okay, not just make sure that there is 30 grams and above protein, is usually higher for me. I will always make sure that my first meal consists most of the fats that I require for the rest of the day. This is because it only makes sense to me that because fats or carbs is a source of energy, you will want to have your energy in the earlier part of the day so that the rest of your day it can be utilized, it can be converted into energy, obviously. So my first meal normally doesn't look like a higher protein ratio. It's because I'm more focused about getting more fats in the first part so that it sets me up properly throughout the rest of my day. My second or third meal, I would then focus on higher protein. In terms of digestion wise, it's also working well for me because I noticed that when I eat higher fats in the earlier part of the day, I don't get that nauseated effect that I get at night if I were to do higher fat like during evening or in my second meal. So my first meal, I will show you a picture somewhere. You would see that the fats are a lot more visible. There are things like your ribeye, a lot of marbling. Sometimes the sirloin, okay, sirloin is my favorite cut, but sirloin that I get, you know, if it's lean, I will add like 2 to 3, 4 egg yolks just to make sure that, to be honest, after being so good at calculating macros because of keto, right? I'm able to gauge that usually my first meal is always a 1-to-1 ratio or sometimes higher in fat, like probably 60%, 70% fat, and then the rest is protein. So if you do things like fatty lamb rack or lamb chops, marbled ribeye, even if you do like a leaner sirloin but you add a lot of egg yolks, right? Or you have butter. I don't do butter, but you can. It is recommended that you do higher fat in the earlier part of the day in your first meal, so that it can be utilized for energy, and then you feel like you can sustain the day a little bit better, so that your second and third meal, depending if you're going to have a third meal, it can be really focused on higher protein. You wouldn't, I guess why I'm recommending that is also because if you're someone like me that, you think that more is more, this is me in the past, where you're very extreme. Oh, I'm on a higher protein, I'm going to do higher protein consistently throughout. You tend to forget to do the fat cycling. I think Dr. Sean Baker did that. He usually eats a lot of ribeye. It's just meat only. And I think there are days that, I think when he was very lean at one point of time, I think it was somewhere in Instagram, I can show. He did mention that he was doing very lean, but every 3 to 4 days he would cycle in a very high fat day. So he will go very low on protein, and then he will go very high on fats on that one particular day. So he cycles it in. This makes sense because you will still want to have that U-shaped curve where nothing is too extreme. You will still want to achieve balance. So now my strategy is I will do really higher fat in the earlier part of the day, and then I'll eat higher protein the later part of the day. And then I am very aware and very sensitive to how I feel, and I do keep track of things. So I know that if I go beyond third day of doing super lean and I try to ignore those effects, I know that it is time to reset back and go higher fat, and then go lower in protein. So if you want to go with the approach of higher protein, I think it's good to have it scheduled at the start, right? To know when to cycle in fats again. If you are trying to attempt 60-70% protein and then the fats, because that is going to be really quite high in protein. Okay, so let's summarize. First meal, I would have 1-to-1 ratio, higher fat, not really higher fat, it's almost equal amount. So 1-to-1 ratio would be things like your lamb rack, ribeye. Actually lamb rack is way higher in fats, but I will balance it out with things like ground beef or different cuts of leaner meats, so that when I look at my plate, right, I kind of visually able to see like the sizes, the amount. That has always worked out well for me. Probably you want to try that out. I will do more egg yolks in the earlier part of the day, and then let's go into my second meal. So I will show you some pictures along the way. You will notice that you will start to see more seafood, because seafood generally it's more lean. Different cuts of beef that is a lot leaner, like your flank steak, which I love. Somehow it's very chewy. It's similar to tenderloin, but obviously tenderloin is like super tender, no marbling at all. I will do venison, which is deer meat, very lean as well. And the ground beef that I get here is not like the ones that that it's available in US, I guess. I could only find the lean 90-10, super lean, super pathetic, but I will do that later part of the day, and then that is when my higher protein it's achieved with my second or third meal. So I don't think about adding additional fats to the second or third meal. Sardine tends to be higher in protein, and it has sufficient amount of moderate amount of fat. So I think it's good if, let's say, you are overall you're doing quite lean already. Sardine is a good choice because it's not too lean. But if you're going for sashimi, tuna, salmon can be quite lean sometimes, except if you go for salmon belly, which I love. And I normally do salmon belly during my fat cycling days. So salmon belly is probably like 70% fat or more. And then you could do mackerel. It's a fatty fish, but it's higher in protein for sure. Ground beef is very high in protein, normally, the ones that I have here. Ground lamb, it's higher in fats. I noticed that the ground lamb that I have here, normally when I eat it, I get full very fast, that almost that nauseating feeling. It's because it's higher in fats. Lamb leg, lamb shoulder cuts, it tends to be leaner. So that is one good alternative for the second part of your meal. Okay, I would summarize to say that usually my second part of the meal, right, it's also according to my lifestyle and what is achievable, and I think this is something you guys should think about. If you want to be very meticulous in terms of your macros, so in the earlier part of the day, I make sure that all my meats are fattier. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, and then the second part of the day, when I am tired from work, I don't really have a lot of time to cook, and I just want something really fast and easy, ground beef is always the best for me. And like I said, I tend to go for the leaner ground beef because I can have more volume, because protein is lower in calories. Fats are definitely higher. Not saying that calories in, calories out, it's something that you should really focus on, but I think there is a part to play as well. So I tend to go for ground beef. The second part of the day is the easiest. Even if it's overcooked, which most of the time I have to overcook it because of, you don't know where it's being processed. Maybe it's mixed in with chicken, so you really have to make sure that it's cooked well, at least in my case. So because when you eat overcooked, well cooked protein, right, it tends to work harder in terms of digestion, so sometimes you will feel a little bit sleepy. So I tend to do this kind of ground beef later part of the day, which is suitable for my schedule, because that is around evening time and when I'm supposed to unwind. So I'm doing higher protein through ground beef, and digestion wise, I think it's also suitable part of the day. Another additional thing that you could probably add in, which is something that I'm experimenting with. So as you know, I did beef only a few months back, and then I started experiencing some hair loss because I did lose some body fats. I am introducing collagen powder, so I do drink it sometimes in my tea, or sometimes I just add it to my eggs. Collagen powder cannot be your only replacement for your protein that has the full profile of amino acids, but I think collagen is a good addition to having higher protein for sure. So I've been adding collagen powder. I will insert the picture somewhere here. It's grass fed. I will add it sometimes to my eggs or over my steak. So one more tip that I wanted to share with you guys, it's when you're doing higher protein, you should also consider your lifestyle, how active you are. I think higher protein works very well for me, for people who are a bit more active when it comes to having a more intense workout routine. Only makes sense because of the gluconeogenesis that I just mentioned about. So normally in a week, I will have 3 days of heavy, intense workout. It could be really heavy weights, or I'll be doing some high intensity cardio. So those days, I will particularly target on not just higher protein, I would actually also do higher fats, because I realized that in the earlier part of this year, when I only did higher protein and I really went pretty low on fats unintentionally, that's when I started to notice that my food, it's not supporting the intensity of my workout. So I think what has been working well for me in the past few weeks is whenever I do my high intensity workout, I would make sure that not just higher protein, it's high protein and it's also higher in fat. So the overall calorie intake definitely is going to be higher, but it's fine because of the kind of workouts that you'll be doing. If it's intense or it's going to be a long duration. But for people that are quite are not so active, that you go for long walks, you don't really do a lot of this glycolytic explosive workouts or moves, I think higher fat would be better for you. Doesn't mean to say that you cannot do higher protein. I think when you do higher protein, it's always very much recommended. It's because of the benefits that I mentioned earlier in the video. You know, you will make sure that you stimulate your muscle in terms of muscle protein synthesis, which is going to promote many benefits in terms of managing blood sugar, your hormones. I think it's great, but I think something to bear in mind is, if you want to do higher protein, make sure to cycle back days when you do higher fats. I think that's the key learning point for me. One more that I wanted to mention is, I noticed that whenever I'm doing higher protein, I tend to salt my food a little bit more. That's only because sometimes when you eat really lean protein, there isn't really a taste to it, because there's no marbling. The fats is where you get the flavor, you know. You tend to salt. Sometimes if you don't really realize, you will salt a lot more than you used to. And that to me is why I wake up in the middle of the night. And it's not because of the super high protein that I ingest, because I do have those days that I do almost the same amount of high protein, but I don't salt so much. I don't wake up in the middle of the night. So I think you need to be a little bit careful with that. This is the end of the video. I hope that I've helped you to understand a little bit better about this higher protein, and through the sharing of my meals, and the tips that I've shared with you is really coming from my own trial and error, my own experiment. I hope that it will help you too. So if you have any questions for me, please sound it off in the comments below. If not, please help me like and share this video. It will really help me, since, you know, my YouTube channel, it's still new. And if you have any topics that you would like me to cover, please let me know. I'll really be excited for it. So thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.